We're going to continue actually from the last session, but first before doing that I want to make two quick clarifications. First off, when I was explaining the issue with Aisha, you may have noticed that I use a lot of science or scientific papers, correct? Now yesterday, you probably thought that I hated science because I was speaking about it in a very, I was saying that it changes, etc., and it can't be used as a proof for the Quran, okay? However, I want to clear up right now that I love science, okay, and I think it's very complementary in many respects. My biggest issue was simply using it as an interpretive tool for divine text. But when it comes to other things, for instance, like other issues related to the religion, like the age of Aisha or something, it can be used in full force as a helpful way of understanding history and understanding other things. So it is a good tool. So I'm not saying to stay away from science, but I am saying that let's not put it as a measuring stick of a divine text. That's all I'm trying to say. But for other things in our lives, we can use it. Okay, so that's one thing. Secondly, I wanted to bring another objection. When the atheist or other Islamophobes mention the Prophet ﷺ as being immoral for having married a young person back then, at the same time, what they're doing is they're condemning basically the entire world prior to the 19th century. Because prior to this, nobody complained about his marriage, and everyone was practicing early marriage. So if it's true, for instance, that, and it's not, that the Prophet ﷺ had done something wrong, astaghfirullah, then that means the entire world was practicing something inappropriate. Now, I find this to be kind of strange, because if pedophilia, you know the term pedophile, it's a mental disorder. It is a mental disorder. So these people are saying that the majority of the world population had a mental disorder. That doesn't make any sense. A mental disorder is a rare, non-normative condition of a person. That's why it's called a disorder. The majority of people who have, if everyone has it, then it doesn't make, I don't think it's possible. It's just not possible. So if they make this claim, in fact, they have to prove that the majority of the world prior also had this issue, which I think is ridiculous. Also, during the break, I remember one of the brothers in here had asked me for evidence for the, I said two things yesterday regarding HIV. I said one man was cured based on a bone marrow transplant, and I said the other one, they're using HIV cells to destroy cancer. Well, I found those reports, so I will show them to you today, so as proof that I wasn't like making things up, you know. So here's one. How modified HIV cells are being used to treat cancer. You can look that up online, okay? Very interesting. And the next one, there's a Wikipedia article about the first man who was cured of AIDS, the Berlin patient. His name was, if I can remember, Anonymous. Timothy Ray Brown. Okay? He was recently cured of AIDS by having a bone marrow transplant. What they did was they took a bone marrow of somebody who they thought was immune to AIDS. They transferred into his body, and he has now been cleared of the virus. So the AIDS virus, being immune to AIDS means that the virus cannot detect the white blood cells of that person. So they took that person's white blood cells, they transferred into his body, and now he no longer has AIDS. He's been cured since 2000.
Just any healthy person? Or
no, a specific individual. So they're trying to determine who those people are, their genetic disposition, and they're trying to now copy, or trying to figure out a way to copy that white blood cell count so they can use it in the future and just transfer it into people who have it. So, and this just happened recently, so the research is still going on, and now they're finding ways to use HIV to kill cancer. So, progress, right? It's interesting. But when we talk about scientific progress in medicine, we have to be careful, because just like with antibiotics, diseases adapt. So now we're having a huge problem right now. They're trying to find more antibiotics because the bacteria are starting to adapt to all of our medicine. So they're getting worse, actually. And they're saying if they don't start finding antibiotics more antibiotics in the next few decades, we might have another plague on our hands, because we won't be immune to anything. So this is one of the puzzles of modern biology. Okay, so let's get rid of that. We're going to talk about atheist psychology now. And here's my YouTube page again. I know people are going to try to add me. So if we want to click on the first page, please, first picture. We're going to go through a series of pictures. I post these things for the purpose of showing people how to debate and how atheists argue. And first off, I want to say that atheists typically do not become atheists because they have some sort of intellectual revelation, okay, that they have some argument that's presented to them, and all of a sudden they say, okay, I can't believe in God anymore. They don't do this. Most of the time it has more to do with the fact that they want to rebel against an authority, or they want to make themselves feel superior in some way. And this is also typical sometimes of religious believers who convert, okay, but most of the time for atheists this is the case. And it also explains their fervent desire to attack religion all the time. You know, somebody who does this has a past with religion in a very negative fashion, okay? Because I've also met some very intellectual atheists who have in fact become atheists because of intellectual reasons, and they don't attack religion at all. They just don't care. You know, they just live their life, and unless something does something to them personally, then they'll say something, but in general they don't really have a reason to do anything. And you usually meet those sort of atheists in philosophy departments where, you know, they're more intellectually driven, okay? But in the common world, most atheists are not like this. Most atheists are like other people, but they try to make themselves look superior by having rejected superstition for the sake of reality and science and all these other things, okay? Which is why they themselves follow these myths like scientism, things like this. Of course, they will never admit that these are myths or that they follow any sort of ideology, but they do. So this is one individual who exemplifies what I consider to be the contemporary atheist, the most popular form. And Gurdev Singh, okay? I believe he may have been a Sikh before this or otherwise. This is on the Warong Atheist Forum. By the way, I'm going to ask you about your homework in a minute, so I hope you all did it. What do you mean, what homework? You said it. Okay. So, this man posted here on this forum. He said he was feeling amused, and I'd seen him post before. He always asked for evidence for God's existence, okay? And so he said, I would just like to thank all the theists in this group for proving to me once for all that the intellectual cancer that plagues our species is more potent than Ebola ever can be. Okay? May God bless us all if we ever find him. Cheers. He's being sarcastic. All right? So he's basically saying, thank you all for not proving God to me because you're all worse, your beliefs are worse than Ebola. You know, so he's being very hyperbolic, meaning that he's using a lot of exaggerated, insulting language. So then he meets me. Okay? Oh, yes, very nice. Thank you. So, okay. Exit. I can't. There's no touch screen. Okay, thank you. Feeling amused about asking for proof proves to me that you're not serious about this discussion. Also, calling theism an intellectual cancer already solidifies my intuition in this regard. Carry on amusing yourself. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to do here in the beginning is I'm trying to get him to actually debate with me. Okay, if you notice, I'm not doing this just to have fun. I want to see if he actually will have a discussion. So I'm poking him right now, okay? Can we go to the next picture? So he responds after I say that with this. So now you notice that my poke was effective. Okay, so he said, when something is based on little to no evidence, remember we've discussed these things before, so everything you're about to read is what I've just informed you about, and is fortified by delusional justifications or even bigger delusions, is an intellectual cancer. After all, what else can one call the fervent validation of fairy tales? Fairy tales. Number 2, there is no discussion. A discussion is a logical dialectical process which requires both parties to have at least some empirical evidence on their side. Empirical evidence. However, discussing creationism versus evolution is like discussing the validity of the Earth being flat versus the fact that it's spherical. And I have no interest in wasting my intellectual capacity debunking fairy tales, because I'm so intelligent. Cinderella and God both came from the same place, the human mind, so please get over yourself. Really, Cinderella. People like you make me more amused, so yes, thank you, sir, I will keep amusing myself. That's good. Okay. 4, instead of asking for proof about the heavens, why don't we just, I'm not going to say that, knuckle down and try to make heaven on earth instead. The world would be a better place. Heaven on earth. What belief? What he's trying to say. Let's make heaven on earth instead. What is he believing in? Humanism. And what else? Progressionism. Thank you. So we've already caught scientism before this and evidentialism. So we have 4 of the major beliefs already. Okay? And also anti-theism was the first one. So yeah, we have all 5 in one post. Lovely. So, I have a life, apparently. That's why he posts things like this. Thus, I will not respond to any of your further rants unless you can provide with me with even a shred of empirical evidence to support your whimsical blather. So he's trying to sound smart here. Reading this comment might lead you to presumption that I am just another arrogant atheist. Yes, indeed it does. So, well, I would say neither myself or any of the other atheists today who draw a hard line with religious nonsense, like I do, are arrogant. They always like to curse. This is one thing I don't like either. It's very hard to quote them. Because I can't say it. You know? So, because it's not arrogance if you can back it up. So he's saying, I'm not being arrogant because I oppose you. I'm not being arrogant. Of course not, but if you act arrogant, there's a difference between disagreeing and being arrogant. You know that. They don't seem to know the difference. And then his 7th point was good night. So I said, okay, my turn. So I had some fun with him after this, and my response is much longer. First, allow me to congratulate you on proving my point. Now let's get through your point, shall we? Now I quote him as saying, when something is based on little to no evidence, I said, no, you want. I said, cancer is an evil or destructive practice or phenomenon that's hard to contain or eradicate. When you decide to back this claim, you have my attention more sincerely. So what I'm asking him to do is to prove that it's an intellectual cancer. So I don't accept anything he says. I'm saying, no, you need to prove it. If you're going to ask me to prove for things, then you need to start proving things, okay? This is one of the strategies you need to do, especially when you hear a lot of these comments. You need to challenge them on their statements. We have a lot of theists today who will accept what an atheist says and then try to prove theism. They say, no, you're wrong, because here's what my religion says. First off, you shouldn't do that. Don't answer to the atheist arguments first. First, ask them if they're valid. Do you have a right to ask me that question? And most of the time, you'll get a certain type of response, which we will see here in a moment. Go down, please. 2. Okay, he says there is no discussion, and he's not going to waste his time on me unless I have some empirical evidence. And I said, you first say there is no discussion, thus proving my point earlier that you're not actually interested in discussion, thank you. And then I said, you go on to say that a discussion is a logical dialectical process which requires both parties to have at least some empirical evidence on their side. And then I say, this is something you need to validate. There are many philosophers and scientists that would disagree with your assessment of discussion and evidence as some form of universal necessity for all claims. So I'm challenging his view on evidentialism. Okay? So I'm saying, you need to prove this first. Don't tell me to give you evidence unless you tell me why. All right. Go down. And then we're going to the next picture, actually. Oh, wait, no. Stop. I can't. Okay. Just to make a quick point, your very claim that the discussion requires empirical evidence cannot be empirically verified. That is an epistemological claim. Sorry for the large term. Epistemological in philosophy means theory of knowledge. It means that this is his theory of knowledge, okay? That has no empirical backing. So please go back to the drawing board before you dictate what a discussion is. Next. Okay, thank you. Next. Yeah. Okay. Up. I also love how you claim that Cinderella and God are in the same category. This is what we call a category error. I discussed this with you earlier, right? When discussing fallacies of logic, Cinderella is imagined precisely because it conforms already to our experiences of natural phenomenon. Cinderella is a physical construct based off our understanding of the forms of human beings. Likewise, things like unicorns, fairies, rotating teapots around Mars, and flying spaghetti monsters are constructs based on our observations of physical phenomenon. A unicorn is just a combination between a horn and a horse. Fairies are just small people with insect wings, etc. The concept of God is claimed to go beyond physical observation and full comprehension. Therefore, your analogy fails. Try again. Okay? Next.
Irritating him, huh?
Yeah, you'll see in a minute. After my response, you'll see his response. Okay? He gets very angry. He said, people like you make me more amused. I said, people who are more learned than you in philosophy debunking your nonsense is amusing, then you shouldn't mind calling you a masochist. Okay, that's just a clever comment on my part. Don't take that seriously. I'm just sort of trying to poke at him a little bit more. Instead of asking for proof about the heavens, why don't we just be quiet and knuckle down and try to make heaven on earth instead? And I said, several figures in the past attempted this, such as Lenin, Stalin, Mao, etc. Do you know who these individuals are? And they slaughtered millions of people? Okay, because they believed they could make heaven on earth? That's what we call a utopia in philosophy. That is impossible. Utopia. Several figures past, too fond of this humanistic utopia. They've caused more than enough bloodshed to outcompete religious ideologies. Thank you very much. I would prefer not to do that. Number 5, I have a life. And I said, when you can provide validation that I need to provide empirical evidence for your vacuous demands, then I may feel obligated to do so. Until then, your life seems very grand for needing to compensate for your lack of intellectual ability through amusing yourself by asking questions you already believe you have answers for. So basically, what I'm not trying to insult him just for the sake of insulting him. What I'm trying to do is getting him to talk to me. Because he's sitting here saying I'm a waste of his time. But at the same time, he's writing these long messages. Right? He's saying, I'm too smart for this. Okay, well, let's see if you can prove it. Next. Oh, and I said, sleep well. Okay. Oh, does it go further down? Oh, this is his response. I can't sleep well any longer. It gives me a migraine thinking down to your level. Your writing and your grammar is sound. Thank you. I think I write very well. Okay, and I commend you for that, but sadly your argument isn't. But keep barking like all good dogs do when they believe the moon will howl back at them, even though it's clear that heaven could care less. Cheers. Okay, my response? That's because your precious, fragile ego has been broken. My apologies for the migraine. When you decide to actually amuse yourself further with real arguments, I might be here to help you entertain yourself. Till then, take some Panadol. Okay, go on. He said, believe whatever you want to believe. That is certainly what you love doing anyway, without any evidence. So he's not answering anything. You notice this? It must be wonderful being religious. Your assumptions are always your conclusions. I go on. I still waiting for empirical evidence to back your claims. I feel I shouldn't hold my breath. He goes on, don't because I'm not going to waste my time. I say, I'll take that as an admission that you have none. Good form, sir, good form. Continue. This gets more interesting. Oh, go up? No, go up, please. So he says, I basically say, I sense these are excuses, or shall we expect the third good night for this evening? Perhaps till the morning. He said, you seem to sense a lot, should I call you something else? And then after I gave him my last response, he did something that I expected him to do. Can we go to the last picture, please? And I thankfully recorded this before he did it, because I wouldn't be able to. He removed the post. He didn't want people to see what I did. I saved it though, and I posted it anyway.
Where is it?
It's on my Facebook page. But the actual post was on that forum, on the Warang Atheist. He deleted it. Because I asked him for the very same standards that he was doing to me, and he couldn't do it. So he got upset, and that was it. So, can anybody tell me anything about this discussion? Does it seem familiar to you at all?
It's always one-sided.
No, besides that, but does he?
This artificial security, superiority, artificial.
Yeah, it's very artificial.
Yeah.
But besides that, but what I'm trying to ask you is, did it feel familiar as you're reading any of this?
Yeah.
Did any of this feel familiar to you at all? Was it because of what we talked about yesterday?
his attitude. No?
The attitude may have not been so familiar, but what I mean is that the actual concepts, the arguments they were using, all of the things that I discussed with you, he said in one sentence, like in one forum post. And these are the common things that will be stated. Okay? Now, how did I object to him? Can anybody give me an idea? Now, yes, I was a little bit sassy with him too. So, I mean, I kind of like, I was trying to have some fun, but
You didn't get banned.
I didn't get banned. You did. But, I'm sorry, I didn't mention. He got banned from the forum. I don't know why. I think you made the admin upset. But I'm surprised though, because I'm usually much more hostile. If you go on Warring Atheists, you can see me debate more like this. And it's entertaining sometimes. There's another discussion I have, part 2, that I like to look at. Did you notice anything else, like how I responded? What was the first thing that I do? Did I try to give him empirical evidence? Why? Why didn't I do that? Most of the time, when you see messages like this, the first thing most Muslims will do, they go to the Quran, or they go to their scholars or whatever, and they try to provide some sort of answer from there, right? And they say, look what the Quran says, look what this says, right? I say, no. I think what you're asking me for is nonsense.
Turning the table, huh?
Yeah, well, it's turning the tables. They don't like that because they say that it's called switching the burden of proof, which is usually a fallacy. It's usually a bad thing to do. You should never switch the burden of proof on somebody. If somebody makes a claim, they have to prove it. Okay? Except under certain conditions. In fact, this fallacy only exists in reference to things which are where evidence is necessary. So when an atheist, though, when they say it, they always mean that everything requires evidence, right? Evidentialism, correct? So that means that their own claims also require evidence, except they don't realize that. They think that they're immune. They think that they can ask for evidence, but when they ask for evidence, they don't think that we have to ask, we can't ask why. Why is it that you think I'm irrational? You say that I'm irrational. You say theism is irrational. That's a claim. Where's your evidence? You say that I need evidence to prove God's existence. That's a claim. And you say that all claims require evidence, so where's your evidence? And they hate it when you do this, actually. Because they think that this problem is only for us. It's not for them. But in philosophy, every claim or every accusation is fair game. Everything. We're not prejudiced in that regard. We don't say, okay, you're immune from this. So that's a fallacy. We call that a double standard. And atheists like to perform these double standards all the time. So what I was doing with this individual was I was trying to get him to at least give me something to respond to. I was hoping that he would try to offer some justification. But like most of the atheists that I discuss with, he did what they usually do. He insulted me. Okay? He said that he didn't have time, though it was apparent that spending 2 hours discussing with me was, he couldn't sleep, so. And he continued to evade the objections. He continued to evade my questions. He did not want to answer me because he can't. And I'm going to tell you right now, one of the biggest flaws of atheists today, one of their biggest flaws is that they are not philosophically informed. They do not understand what they're saying or what they're asking for. But if you understand what they're saying, what they're asking for, it's very easy to debate with them. Very easy to debate with them. Is this? Oh, yes. Here we go. This is lovely. I'm not going to say this man's name because it sounds very bad in English. Okay? But yes. Let's not. I apologize once again to the ladies in the back. This is not me. This is the vulgarity of the people that I'm arguing with. So once again, you see the fighters for women's rights right here. And talking in a very horrible manner, or having names that are very derogatory to women. So I always like the hypocrisy of these individuals. So you know what he's arguing about, correct? You can read that. Okay, it was just about what we talked about recently. Okay, so we're going to go through this. So this is his main claim. So let's go to my response. Okay, so I gave him my article to read, and he said, The only thing I fail to know is the condition of the lifestyle at the time. If the studies were true that most mothers died while giving birth to their child, then the reason Muhammad married Aisha was to prevent this from happening and for Aisha to give him more offspring. The action may be justifiable if you're a poor, desperate peasant, but Muhammad wasn't a mere peasant. He was in fact a prophet from God. Muhammad had more than 5 wives, more than enough healthy wombs to increase his descendants. He wasn't in any sort of desperation. He did not marry Aisha to bear children. Aisha doesn't have children at all. He didn't have children at all. If Allah was a moral being, he should have warned Muhammad that his action having sex with a 9-year-old girl was morally wrong or unfit as a prophet. So he gives an argument in response to my article. And that argument is basically this, okay? He's saying that I was claiming that the reason people got married back then, okay, early, was to have children because they knew they were going to die. Is that correct? Was that what I said? I didn't say that, did I? So this is what we call a straw man fallacy. Straw man, when you build, oh my God, when you build, we call this a straw man fallacy. This is the most common fallacy in logic. And what it means is called an informal fallacy of logic. This is what you do. This is why we call it a straw man. Okay, what is a straw man in real life? It's a man made of straw, right? Okay, so you build a man made of straw, and you usually did this in farms, and the birds would think it's a person, and it's a scarecrow, okay? So what the person does is they build a straw man, metaphorically speaking, and they burn it down, and they go, look, I won. I killed you. I killed somebody, see? So what they're doing with your argument is they're building, instead of taking the real argument, they're building a straw version of it, and they burn it down and they claim they win. See, like, oh, right? So what he's doing to my argument is he's misrepresenting me. He's saying what I did not say, and then he's attacking it and saying you're wrong. Okay, this is...
What's the analogy called again?
A straw man fallacy. So this is what a straw man is. You may hear this sometimes in discussions. It means you are misrepresenting my argument and attacking the wrong thing. Okay? Misrepresenting me. And you're attacking the wrong thing. Alright? So this is not even my argument. Okay, so how should I respond to this? Okay, if we go down a little bit more.
I don't think there's one.
Oh, I want to see what he says. Okay. Oh, sorry, go back.
You want to go back?
Yeah. No, I just want to read one more thing. Okay, he said, he said, the action may be justifiable if you're a poor, desperate peasant. Did I say anything about people being poor, desperate peasants? I said everyone back then had the same, standard. Okay, and I used scientific evidence to show, biologically speaking, this was normal. Okay, not the fact that it was you're either a peasant or you're a rich person, then you can do it. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. And then he said Muhammad wasn't a mere peasant. He was in fact a prophet from God. That doesn't mean anything. That's what we call a red herring. A red herring. A red herring was something they used during hunting, okay, to deflect attention. It means deflecting attention. It means that you're trying to move away from the objection. You want people to be distracted by something else. So he's trying to distract away from the red herring fallacy is when you distract away from the main point. You're trying to distract. So you mention something that has nothing to do with that to move away from the conversation. Okay? This is how people evade getting into more arguments about a certain point if they can't answer. Okay. So he mentions Muhammad had more than 5 wives, so therefore he didn't need to marry Aisha because he had enough women to have babies with. But once again, was my argument about marrying Aisha for the sake of having children? No. So this argument is completely irrelevant to anything that I'm saying. Let me go to the next one. Okay, so, and then I mentioned that. I said, if that's the comment, I don't see how it refutes anything that I just said. Okay? The study shows conclusively that maturation, both biologically and socially, concur within set circumstances that are flexible depending on those circumstances. You are arguing over Muhammad ﷺ's intentions. I'm arguing that his intention was to marry mature women, and back then people matured faster, as the study indicates, including Aisha's own testimony to this fact. So I'm refuting him by simply saying that what you're saying is not what I'm saying. Okay, that's it. Your argument is invalid. Okay, that's all I'm trying to say. If you wish to take the hadith as evidence that he married her at 9, then you should also take the hadith as evidence that she was mature. You can't just say this hadith says this, so is something wrong with him, and at the same time say Aisha was mature when she said herself, I'm mature. So either which one do you want? You can't reject one and accept the other. And further, if he really wanted to have sex with her as a child, he wouldn't have waited till she was 9, because when did he actually contract the marriage? 6. So why was he waiting for 3 years? If he really wanted to do something wrong. Doesn't make any sense. If he's a prophet, he can get away with anything, right? He can do anything he wants. He can just claim if there was something wrong, if he was making it up, if he was using his status in a bad way, which is one of the arguments that Islamophobes will use as well, then why did he wait 3 years? If he was attracted to her when she was young. Does a pedophile in our current society wait 3 years before? No, they don't. They take any opportunity that they can get, right? So this doesn't make any sense. And then I said, in any regard, the studies in her testament go against your moral indignation, because you are not including factors outside of your contemporary understanding of human development. Okay? Muhammad ﷺ was just doing what everyone else knew was the norm then and now, marrying mature women. The fact that they matured faster back then is not the fault of his own or any invalidation of the moral codes prescribed by Allah. Okay? Because Allah says, marry mature women. That's it. He doesn't say at 9 or 10 or 11, just when they're mature. So, I'd like to include that I find it very interesting how many of you will condemn the Prophet as this, but then don't understand the implication of this condemnation. And I mentioned this to you before. Basically, you're saying that the majority of the world's population prior to the 1900s were all pedophiles, when we know this is a mental disorder. So if you're willing to argue that it was normative that the majority of the world prior to the last 100 years were all suffering from a mental disorder, I find this to be an extraordinary claim, if I may say so myself. Okay, then he goes on. He just continues to repeat the same thing that I just refuted. So if you haven't noticed yet, he does not read anything that I post. Okay? He is not reading anything that I'm actually saying. What he is reading is what he wants to read, just like in the same way that they read the Quran and they read the Hadith. He is selectively taking parts of what I say and arguing against those. When you debate with atheists, this will always happen. And it's very frustrating, because you're trying to argue and they won't listen to what you have to say. They just keep saying the same thing over and over again. And the strategy here is that you need to keep repeating yourself. Many Muslims, or many Christians and Jews even in general, I've seen a lot of religious debates in my life, what they will do is that they will accept this, actually. They will just continue arguing based on the atheist comments instead of their own. They won't stick to their ground. They say, okay, the atheist is saying something else, so now I have to respond to that. Oh, now he's saying this, so I have to respond to that. Now he's saying this, I have to respond to that. And they keep going and going until they don't even remember the first thing they said. And the atheist is like, see, you're stupid. You know, I proved you wrong because you can't answer all of this, you know. And this is a very evasive strategy they'd like to do. Many of them resort to this in order to win a discussion. And what I want you to know is that if they do this to you, ignore it, 1. And 2, continue to repeat yourself until they address the objections. You need to learn how to control the conversation. Don't let the atheist control it for you. Because most of what they have to say is all speech. That's it. It's no substance. It's mostly speech. It's mostly the way they say it. That's how they win the discussion. We call this sophistry. Sophistry. And the word sophistry comes from the word sophist, or sophist, if you would, however you wanted to pronounce that. Tomato, tomato. Okay? So the sophists were people during the Greek era, okay, the ancient Greek, that they used to be like tutors, and they would teach people how to speak in a very eloquent way. So they were like poets, okay? And they never used to say anything factual. But they used to be hired by politicians to learn how to speak, to convince people by tricking them with their words. So when we say something is sophistry, what we're saying is that you have a lot of nice words, but there's nothing there. Okay? It's all style, but no substance.
Obamology.
Basically. But I love George Bush because he wasn't a sophist. He was too stupid to be a sophist. So he said exactly what came to his mind. You know, George Bush Jr. And they hate us because of our freedoms. You know, and he would say the most ridiculous things, right? Obama is very good at it. Obama's a very good sophist. He's very good. If you ever watch his speeches, he's extremely eloquent, and he doesn't say anything directly. So that if you actually try to interpret what he says, he can say, I didn't say that. See what I mean? So this is how a sophist operates. And many times you can notice when an atheist doesn't want to give you a direct answer, or if they're trying to evade, this is what they're going to resort to. Okay. So, okay. Okay, here we go. I even post a hadith that portrays her maturity. She was still playing with dolls when she is in Muhammad's care. So once again, in my article, that if he would have read, he would have noticed that I actually already mentioned this, right? But he doesn't want to read. Yeah, he's just saying the same thing over again. Oh, but he's saying it's an excuse. Now, in my opinion, if he actually would have read my argument, he wouldn't think this was an excuse. Because it says in that argument that she was 14 years old when she was playing with dolls. And he's thinking that she was still 9. Uh-oh. So how can he say that I'm making an excuse? Because when it's told 2 different time periods, when this doll incident occurred, it's 5 years after she got married. Okay. So he said the hadith already provided enough evidence that the Prophet had done an immoral act as a child, to a child. Really? Okay, let's go on. Oh, okay, so I post something from the article mentioning the doll incident. Can we go down again? Sorry. Next. Yeah, I mentioned this already. Next. Okay, next. Or does he say anything at the bottom? I'm sorry, go down. No, okay, next. Okay, end quote. So go down. And then I say this. You said, I don't care if 1,000 years ago it was a normal thing to do. It is still an immoral act and unfitting, especially for a prophet. I said, so you're admitting that you believe the majority of the world suffer from the mental disorder of pedophilia and that marrying a mature woman is immoral. So I ask him a question. I'm trying to get him to see how ridiculous this statement is. So I'm asking him, do you believe this? Okay, so let's go. Okay, so he responds, and he says something very rude, so we're not even into that. Go down. He said, granted, I did miss a couple of your points. So now he's saying, okay, I missed some of your points. Now, this was after I kept repeating myself about 3 or 4 times. Okay, so now he's saying, oh, okay, I missed your points. So now you see, I'm controlling the conversation, I'm bringing him back. So now he's trying to address this. Anyway, I don't think that 1900 years ago, or people suffered from mental disorders. So he's saying, no, they didn't suffer. But I do think that they have not truly investigated the proper age for a girl to reach a certain mentally, to handle sexual acts. Prophet of God's job is to teach this, is it not? So now he's saying it's not a mental disorder, but they were ignorant. Okay? So now he's changing a little bit here. Okay? So you notice he's getting a little softer, maybe? Okay, let's keep going. Okay. The Prophet, and I mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ told us to marry women who are mature. He didn't specify an age. The fact that Aisha was 9 doesn't mean it's mandatory or allowed for us to marry 9-year-olds just because they're 9. Nowhere in the fiqh does it state this. It only states we are to marry women who are physically and mentally mature. That's it. Okay. He said, okay, then is having sex with a 9-year-old girl is acceptable or not? So now you see he's trying to ask me a loaded question. This is what we call a loaded question. Loaded question. I'll give you an example of another loaded question. Have you stopped beating your wife yet? Have you stopped beating your wife yet? Now, if you say yes, that means that you beat your wife. If you say no, it means that you beat your wife. It's called a loaded question. Either you say yes or no, you lose, right? This is what he's asking me, okay? So I'm going to answer him in a different way. I'm not going to say yes or no because I know it's a trick, okay? I respond, I said, having sex with a mature woman is acceptable regardless of age. That was my response. So I got away from it, okay? This is a trick. Watch for the loaded questions. Sometimes you'll get them. Sometimes people ask you, do you follow that violent religion called Islam? If they say, no, I don't follow Islam. If you say yes, you follow Islam, but then you're admitting that it's violent, right? So you wouldn't answer that question, right?
How do you answer that question?
You don't say yes or no, first off.
What do you say?
You say, that question is a loaded question. That's wrong question to be asking. Because I don't believe in something that's violent, and I believe in Islam. So you just don't fall for the question. Loaded questions are often asked, they already have the conclusion in mind. So he's not asking you for any other reason than to just provoke you or to already state his opinion. He's not asking for any open discussion, okay? So, continue. Okay, we go up.
You said something on below.
He contracted the marriage when she was 6 and consummated at 9 when she became mature. Yes, so I'm continuing to say the same thing over and over again. I'm not breaking away from that. I'm standing my ground. Okay. He said, by Islam's view, how do we determine if a child is mature enough to have sex? I said, in detail and extensively in part 3, I said, back then it was more difficult, so they based it on normative understanding of what constitutes mature. Nowadays we have more advanced methods to determine maturity. As such, Islamic law should incorporate them. So I would say the contemporary standards of legal sexual maturity are in line with Islamic principles. Okay, so then he keeps going. Okay, then it's okay for someone age 43 to marry a 8-year-old child if that child is mature enough to learn and cook and clean. See, he's still trying to push it. So let's see how I respond. Let's not be trivial. Okay? Back then, those societies had few options, like little to no education, things I've already explained to you. Today, the world is much different. It would be unjust to marry a young girl at such an age, even if she had miraculously reached physical maturity, which is unlikely, because her mental state would not be prepared enough for a marriage in this contemporary environment. Go down. I would even go as far as to say that it's haram by all accounts. Okay? Then another atheist comes in. This is actually a murtad who's hiding their face. This is not their name, right? But they've told me on that forum that they are an apostate. Okay? Are there any references to indicate that Aisha was experiencing physical changes in her body as a result of puberty, such as menstruation and stuff? I mean, surely that should be part of what is normative or saying for a female to be considered physically mature, correct? So notice now that the atheists are starting to actually kind of try to talk to me, okay? Because they notice that I'm not going to follow their style of talking, and I'm not going to fall for their tricks. All right, so I'm now standing my ground, I'm making my argument very clear, and I'm forcing them to answer to me. Okay, so now I'm controlling the situation. So now I can actually say what I want to say. Aisha herself states the following prior to her consummation, and I showed you this hadith already. I have seen my parents following Islam since I attained the age of puberty. On a day passed with the Prophet ﷺ visit us both in the mornings and evenings. Okay? That's Sahih. Let's go next. Okay. Now this one is very stubborn. Okay, so we assume that she was menstruating at 9 because she claimed she attained puberty at that age. Great. So she's being sarcastic. Right. I go, what else do you want? You believe the hadith that states she was consummated with the age of 9, but not the hadith where she says she has reached puberty? Continue. I want to see evidence that she was experiencing puberty. I want to see evidence that she was experiencing puberty, even though she says, I've reached puberty. Okay, this is ridiculous, right? Okay, right, I gave up on her, by the way. I just gave up on her. Another point, when they get like this, after you've been very clear, and their questions start to become ridiculous, ignore them. It's not worth your time. I'm just being honest. Keep focusing on the people who actually want to talk to you. Okay? Okay, then finally, I don't know Asadullah. If we can give a pass to Muhammad for his act, many Muslims who seek to follow his path may well up commit horrible inhuman behavior. But still, I give you this. You made me doubt on what I believed about Muhammad being pedophile. The chance of me being wrong about him have increased by 30%. Alhamdulillah. He didn't become a Muslim, but he doesn't say this anymore. Okay? That was a long and very tiring conversation. And he was the only one that I got. But, yes ma'am. Go ahead.
Regarding the hadith, the Aisha trained dog when she was 14 years old, how the story make that we believe at 9 years old she already matured, because playing with dog is some sort of science that you still have to keep in your...
Not necessarily. And the reason why they make this assumption is because doll playing in this day and age is usually associated with that. But let me tell you something else. In the historical records, dolls were one of the only possessions that most women owned. Okay? Before they got married. Meaning that they would take their childhood objects with them into the marriage home to give to their children later. Alright? That's why the hadith also says that when the Prophet ﷺ removed the veil from the closet, he saw her dolls. Because they were being stored. So maybe she was looking at them or playing with them because of what, nostalgia? Maybe, meaning that she was thinking about when she was younger. Okay? She has no children.
You know, Jibril still hugs his teddy bear until today. Right?
Really? Very nice. But let's think, but is this really... I won't, no, don't worry about it. So I will not, but is this really a controversy though? If somebody was playing with dolls? Let me ask you a question. Who here, at least even when they were after 20 years old, 30 years old, got on a swing? Anybody here like to go on a swing sometime? You laugh, right? Look, I'll be honest with you. If I feel a little bit kiddish sometimes, I like to go on a swing when nobody's looking. I'm just being honest. Why not?
See, those days you played doll. Today you play PS2.
Yeah, I play PS2. Yeah, we have different toys.
I play PS4.
It's like I got a better one than you. So, right? Or who here has some of their childhood things? Sometimes they take them out.
Legos.
Sometimes Legos. If I'm bored of them and I see Legos on the floor, I'm playing with them. Okay, right? Sudoku is not really a childhood thing, but I play it too. Okay, right? So the action of play never leaves us. And if we have an object, and sometimes we act childish to some degree.
One example is we still watch cartoons today.
Yeah, I watch cartoons. I'm sorry, I gotta be honest.
Even my mother, she will just fix and watch.
Yeah, and it's not for any reason. It's not because she's immature. It's just that sometimes we like to be, have fun like we used to when we were kids. That's it. That's it. So that argument is actually so superficial. It's such a superficial thing. Oh, she's playing with dolls, so she must be a little girl. I mean, come on.
I want to ask you, how long did you spend your time communicate with this person? Until a level you feel okay, decision?
Okay, I only continue when I think there's progress. So, for instance, with this guy, I noticed that he was starting to soften up. He was very hostile to me at first. But then he started to kind of like ask normal questions like you would like if you're trying to be nice to somebody in a conversation. The atheists are also very hostile because they're online. And when you're online, you can hide your face and everything. You can just be as mean as possible because you're not standing in front of the person talking to them. They wouldn't talk like this in front of you because they would just punch in the face. But so normally people act differently when they're on the computer than when they're in real life. So when I started to break him down a little bit and he started to see that I wasn't going to follow his line of thinking and that I was very sincere and that I was being calm, he started to give me a little bit of room. So he started to be sympathetic. Okay, and then he started to listen to what I had to say, and then eventually he opened his mind. Now there were some who were very stubborn. They won't, like that one lady. I want direct. I want to be there, and I want to see. I want to see her bleeding. Then I'll believe it. Like okay, I get my time machine, go back. Okay. You know what I mean? Like these people are so unreasonable, and when you see people talk like that, then you just ignore them. Because you know for a fact that they have no intention of discussing with you. The only reason they want to do is they just want to destroy what you have to say, that's it. So, but I also want you to look at something else. There's a difference in the way that I talked here and in the previous conversation. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
How did I talk in this one?
He was plain.
Huh?
Quite plain conversation.
I was very straightforward and I was more or less like, I was kind of calm.
No jargon.
Was it because I was in a good mood or something? No, it was actually a style of my conversation. I change my style depending on the person. Okay, and the Quran actually does this as well, by the way, in many instances. The Quran tells us that when an ignorant person speaks harshly to us, we should say words of peace, right? But at the same time, there are other passages that speak specifically to the Prophet ﷺ. He says, be harsh with the kuffar and the hypocrites, the munafiqeen, right? Be harsh with them in speech. So there are different levels of people and different times in which you employ different forms of conversation. Now, why was I nice to him? Because I noticed as the conversation went on, because I was actually discussing with more than one person, there was like 4. I just didn't show you. There was a lot of them, and they had a lot of vulgar comments. So as the conversation went on, I noticed that he was being a little softer. So I continued to be calm with him because I knew it's like fishing. You know, I got a bite. So it's like, okay, keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, okay? With the other one, I knew that he didn't want to have conversation at all, the first one. So I used him as an example. So I destroyed him for the sake of others to see. So they would not follow his lead. So for him, I was harsh, very harsh. Because I wanted to show people that you do not do this and get away with it, okay? But with the other one, I noticed that there was an inkling, there was a possibility that he might listen to me. So I continued to be peaceful with him. Okay, this is what we have to do. We can't be harsh with everyone, and we can't be nice to everyone. If I was nice to the first one, he would walk all over me, okay? But I was harsh with him because I knew I wasn't going to get the results I wanted. So I used him instead to help others.
What do you mean by being harsh? I mean, because you were not being disrespectful in some topic.
Well, I was being very sarcastic in many instances, and I was kind of poking at him, and I was undermining his intellectual. I was going after him a lot. So I was making him feel uncomfortable and insecure. You know, and this is one way of being harsh with somebody. He had a big ego, so I made sure to destroy that. And the reason I did it was for no other reason than to show him as an example to other people that you don't debate like this. Okay, don't come into a discussion with this sort of attitude because you're going to lose. Okay, and with the other one, instead of trying to hurt his ego, I tried to build him up. I respected him as a fellow person, and I said, look, here's the evidence, think about it. And I gave him questions. I said, think about this. Are you trying to say that everyone had a mental disorder back then? He was like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. See, I wasn't saying, you're saying that you had a mental disorder. I wasn't saying that. I was trying to ask him to get him to answer for me. So you see, I was being much more gentle in that respect. If I wanted to be mean, then I would have been like, you're an idiot because this is what you think. Okay? But I knew that if I did that with this person, he would become harsh again, and he wouldn't listen to anything I have to say. Right? But even the Quran itself, you notice how I was being repetitive? This is also how the Quran acts against the Quraysh in many instances. Right? Ar-Rahman. Surah Ar-Rahman. Right? How many?
31.
Yes. Which of the blessings of the Lord do you deny? Continues this statement over and over and over and over again. And even the surah is Ar-Rahman. The first ayah is what? Ar-Rahman, right? The beyond merciful, right? He's speaking directly to who? He's saying, I'm being merciful to you. I'm repeating myself over and over and over again so that you understand. And instead of first saying that I created you, what does he say? The one who created, the one who taught the Quran. I'm being merciful to you by giving you this Quran. I'm telling you one more time, not one more, but continuously, I'm teaching you this. It is a mercy from me, and I am your teacher. And then he says what? I created you, right? Brought you into existence. But he mentions first the Quran. So what he's trying to say is that, listen to what I have to say. This is my mercy to you. Listen to me. I repeat myself over and over again. Okay? So that is a strategy, and I get that opinion from Nouman Ali Khan, by the way. I'm not just making that up. Okay? So
There's a video on it.
yeah. So this is a strategy also of the Quran. So sometimes you see ayahs in the Quran that mention you be harsh with the kuffar, you be harsh with the munafiqeen, you be harsh with them. And then there's some that say be peaceful, be calm. But you have to realize that it depended on the behavior of the individual and their mentality. It did not depend on just the fact they believe or they don't believe. So there are a lot of Muslims sometimes that say we should always be harsh with the Quran. Astaghfirullah. We should always be harsh with the kuffar and the munafiqeen. We should always be harsh with them. Depends. You have to judge correctly. Try to look. I mean, you can never read the intentions of a person, but you can judge their psychology based on how they speak to you. And the first way of doing that is asking them questions, like I did, prodding them, trying to see, okay, are you willing to talk to me? So here's some questions, answer. And if they say, I don't want to answer, I don't have time for this, I'm too smart for you. And they keep going and going, then you know there's something wrong with that person. So you, okay, fine. So that means that now I'm going to cut you down, okay? So this is what you need to, these are the sort of strategies that you need to employ whenever you debate. Now I've given you these examples not to show how awesome a debater I am, because I've lost many debates in the past. And, you know, that was a very humiliating moment. Okay? And when you lose a debate, it doesn't mean that the argument that you have is wrong, by the way. It just means that you're not as good at strategizing. Because a debate is really a conversation. It's a game. Remember I talked earlier when he was debating me yesterday for like 20 minutes. I said it was a game, right? Because it is a game. It's like a puzzle. You have to figure out how to get around certain things. You have to know how to talk, and at the same time you have to know when to point out people's flaws in argumentation and why they're saying what they're saying. Okay? And you have to understand their psychology. So it's a very, dawah is not just what type of response you give. Okay? And to who. It's about how you talk, but it's about also how you judge the character and how you're able to move the conversation forward and how you're able to what? I think the most important thing is control the conversation. You need to control the conversation at all times. If you dominate the conversation, you win. Okay? And the reason and the way you do that, even if somebody's attacking you, if they come in with all of these arguments, you have to focus it on one thing at a time. You get a lot of people, especially Islamophobes, the first thing they'll do when they attack Islam is they'll mention like, here are 90 ayahs that say this one thing, and you see this is what the Quran says, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to answer all 90 of those. You know, so let's focus on the most important one. So let's ask them, okay, which ayah do you think is the most significant in this list? Or give me 10. They say, okay, here's 10. So we've dropped it down to 10 now. Great, okay. So you're willing to work with me. All right, so now we can focus. And say, which of these 10 do you think is the most significant? Maybe this one. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's go to the tafsir. Okay, since you agree with me that we're going to talk about this one ayah, let's go to the tafsir, let's go to the hadith, let's mention this. Let's talk about this and explain it, see? But if you go into the conversation and go, okay, I'm going to explain all 90. Okay. A lot of people do this. Big mistake. Don't do it, because I'm going to tell you right now, the atheist is not going to read it even if you read a novel. Okay, they're not doing this to get a response. They're doing this to attack you. Okay, and when you attack somebody, you don't want them to respond and to prove you wrong. You just want to be right, right? So if the person's willing to discuss, first ask them if they're to agree to some conditions. Can we just talk about this? Okay, can we have a fair discussion here? And if they're not willing to, then ignore them. If they are, continue the conversation. Okay. Those people I consider the open-minded ones. But most of the time they won't do it. So I promise you they will usually avoid the discussion because they don't want to get into anything that proves their assumptions wrong. A lot of atheists like to say, we're most open-minded people. If you just show us evidence, we'll change. Usually that's not the case. But with this individual, I was very fortunate. And I'm going to tell you, this doesn't happen all the time. This happens about 1% of all my conversation. Not even, probably less than that, of all my conversations. And it's not because, I guess it sounds very arrogant, but I think of myself as a pretty good debater because I've been doing it for like 6-7 years. And I've been taught formally how to do so. I'm not perfect. Like I said, I've lost a few of them, especially with people who are much more advanced than me. So I believe, just based on my own self-confidence, that most of the time that people don't want to listen is because of themselves. Because when you extend an olive branch, you know, when you extend an arm of peace to somebody and you say, let's have a fair conversation, and they don't want to do it, whose fault is that? Is it yours or that person? So like the first gentleman that I mentioned, he was completely unwilling to answer anything I said. Completely unwilling. He just kept calling me an idiot. And so I knew from that point that there's no point in this discussion. So prior to, I guess, closing the session, we have about 10 minutes or so. Does anybody have any questions related to what I've just shown you before we get into the more technical information in the next session?
Can you recommend me some websites? Websites that discuss thoroughly about the issues.
About what issues?
Any issues that brought up by the atheists.
There are many websites online that discuss atheism. However, I'm going to warn you, they're mostly from Christians. Because Christians, for some reason, they have actually a lot of philosophers on their side. The main Christian philosopher that a lot of people like to refer to is Alvin Plantinga. And another one is, God, I forgot his name. Not St. Augustine, I'm talking about contemporary. He uses the Kalam cosmological argument. If it comes to my mind again, I'll tell you. But there are two specific philosophers they use, and mostly Christians like to debate with atheists. So when you see religious people debating with atheists, usually it's going to be Christians doing it. And unfortunately, Christians are much more philosophically informed than we are. Much more. That's why they have a lesser rate of, I guess, deconversion than that, even though for some reason they act the same. So it's a complicated thing, but Christians tend to be able to keep their followers a little bit easier than we do, and that's because we have yet to respond in the same manner. And in fact, Christians are much more advanced in terms of their philosophical arguments. Now, a website that you can go to, okay, the best website to deal with atheism today, I'm going to mention what I consider the second best, and that's IERA. Okay, that's where Hamza Sources is. Okay, yeah, Islamic Education Research Academy. Okay, Hamza Sources is from there. I'm going to say this before I say anything else. I love Brother Hamza. He's a good da'i. Okay, he's done a lot of good work, and he makes a lot of good arguments. But me and him disagree on certain things. Okay, for instance, what I'm showing you here, he does not teach. He has not taught. Okay, what I'm teaching you here in detail, basically in regards to the fallacies and things like this, regards to their main beliefs, we differ on that. Okay, we differ in terms of, even he'll argue from the fitrah, for the existence of God, but our arguments are very different. The way that we approach it is different. So we have the same sort of arguments, but we disagree about how to present them and what the argument is actually about and and the validity of it. Okay, so obviously he doesn't agree with me, I don't agree with him. So if you go to his website and you see his arguments, you'll notice there'll be different things, which alhamdulillah is there, so it's for you to decide what you think is more valid. Okay, so I'm not going to say that he's bad or he's wrong. Okay, if you think that his arguments are more rational, feel free to use them. Right? He's also more popular, so he has a larger following. So a lot of more people are using his arguments anyway. I'm just entering the scene, so I'm hoping that mine will catch on and that they'll be used as well. But we'll see. It's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So the first one would be mine, but. No, I'm serious. And the reason I say this is, like I said, it's not because of arrogance, but because I've actually focused on this very subject alone for most of my academic career. I have engaged with more atheists. I have engaged with a lot of philosophers who are against atheists. I have engaged with all the main da'is against atheism. And I will tell you this right now just from my own personal opinion, because you're asking my personal opinion. The subject, I know more about the subject. And I have actually, and the reason that I disagree with some of the other da'is on the subject is because I have taken their arguments, and as the annoying philosopher that I can be, I've critiqued them inside and out. And I have found some flaws of my own that's the reason I don't use those arguments. And I have seen people using those arguments sometimes, and they lose debates very badly. So the reason I'm offering these arguments is because these are the ones that I think work. And I'm just giving you what I honestly feel. I'm not trying to say that I'm better. I'm just telling you this is how I think. So if you disagree with me, feel free to. If you think Hamza Source's views are better, then please choose them as long as they're effective and that you honestly believe them to be the best method of approach. So I'm not saying don't go to him, but I would say that I think what I'm offering you here is more effective dawah-wise and in terms of the validity of the argument itself, okay, in terms of its effectiveness. I think that a lot of da'is and a lot of Muslim thinkers in general don't really understand the subject of atheism still, even though they debate with them always. They don't understand what their main beliefs are, they don't understand what their main arguments are, and even when they do understand the main arguments, their response is usually regurgitated from past arguments used by some of the ulama, which is okay to some degree, but those ulama didn't understand the atheism of today. They understood the atheism of their time. So their arguments are not exactly appropriate. Okay? So you'll see a lot of Muslim intellectuals use the cosmological argument, for instance, which is the universe had a beginning, so therefore it must have been a creator. You know, this is a very simplistic view of the argument. I'm not going to give you the exact. There's many versions of it, by the way. There's a Kalam cosmological argument, and there's other ones as well. And then there's also the design argument. I mentioned the design. That's a very common one, right? The world looks designed. It's very complex. It's more complex than what we can make, so therefore it must be a designer. Okay, these arguments are effective among the people who already believe. But among atheists today who are asking for scientific evidence, it doesn't work, because these aren't scientific arguments. These are philosophical arguments, correct? And an atheist does not accept philosophical arguments. So the only way to force them to accept philosophical arguments is that you make them realize that their views on science are also philosophical. That's the approach that I'm taking. I'm trying to undermine the atheist. I'm trying to refute them by showing that how they're arguing and what sort of arguments they're using are ultimately based on what? Not science, but something else. And when you do that, then the arguments by the other thinkers and theologians become more effective. But as of right now, simply telling somebody an atheist a philosophical argument is not going to convince them, and it's not going to refute their objections, because they want tangible scientific evidence.
Tangible, no?
Tangible. They want something that they can see, something that is testable, observable, but this is nonsense. And we have to show that it's nonsense. We can't keep trying to appease them by saying, okay, I'll try to go find some empirical evidence for you right now for God. Excuse me, God, help me out. We don't do that. Okay, that's not how the proof for God comes about. That's not how we prove our religion, for instance. We don't use scientific evidence. We never have.
There was once hadith. Someone asked for a proof with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. What is the proof God existed? So he answered that footsteps of a camel is an evidence that a camel went past by. So a lot of da'is are using this hadith or this method to argue that design proves there's a designer.
The thing is that these are considered signs, indirect. But for an atheist, he doesn't want indirect. So if you say, look, this looks like a designer was here, they'll still question that and say, we don't have absolute proof because it hasn't been tested and observed. And they'll say this about the camel, by the way. They say, yes, we know those are a camel's footprints because we've seen camels making them. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That's what they'll say in response. So I'm not saying that what the Prophet ﷺ said was wrong, but what I'm trying to say is, according to atheist ideology today, that is not sufficient. So in order for it to be sufficient, we have to find a way to destroy their assumptions, because their assumptions are actually what's getting in the way of the da'wah. Because what they want is unreasonable, and they don't realize that. So we have to prove to them that they're being unreasonable first before we can give them any evidence for arguments. That's why the main argument that I gave you yesterday regarding how the natural world can't give us this idea of God, it was for the whole sake of destroying their whole philosophy. So I attacked it, I completely destroyed it, so that the only option they have is to look in the other direction. Okay? Because if somebody's argument is flawed, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong about what they believe, but it shows that they have no real good reason for believing it or for rejecting something. And that opens the doors after that. So many atheists are convinced of themselves that religion and belief in God is irrational because there's no evidence for it. And they believe that the only evidence there is scientific. So you need to undermine that first before you can actually have a discussion. And that's the problem. And I find that that many da'is are not doing that anymore. They're not actually doing that. They're trying to approach the subject assuming that the atheists will accept their arguments without the scientific evidence, and they're also assuming that sometimes that the atheists are correct about scientific evidence, which is wrong, which is why you also have people trying to use the Quran as a way of proving God's existence or Islam through scientific miracles. So they're accepting the atheist standard. So the atheists have already won. And that's why they continue to win and get more converts to their side, because we're not actually addressing what they're saying or what they really think. We need to look into their thought process, like I've mentioned here, and we need to try to find a way to undermine it and see the fallacies or the instability of their arguments and their beliefs, just like they're doing to us, apparently, right?